I lay in a hospital bed, broken and wrapped in bandages, while my wife stood beside another man, holding his hand like I had never existed. She didn't cry, she didn't apologize. She told me I was a burden. She told me she had already sold our house. She didn't know that just hours before the crash, I had signed documents confirming a $52 million inheritance, and when her new partner walked into the room to mock me, he looked at my face and screamed. But not for the reason you think. My name is Adrian Mercer. I'm 35 years old, and until that day, I thought I understood pain. I was wrong. As a rare books and manuscript conservator, I spent my life restoring fragile things, centuries-old pages, forgotten histories, objects others believed were beyond saving. I believed patience and precision could preserve anything. I just never imagined my own future would be destroyed in a single second. The ICU was silent except for the steady rhythm of machines proving I was still alive. My body felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds, and a searing agony burned through my legs. When I tried to move, nothing happened. Panic rose in my chest as the memory returned: the rain-slick highway, the blinding headlights, the truck swerving into my lane. I had been racing home to tell my wife our lives were about to change forever. Instead, I woke up to discover she had already decided mine was over. I woke up fully to the sound of machines breathing for me. The ICU smelled of antiseptic and cold metal, the air thick with the quiet hum of life support systems. Every breath felt like dragging shards of glass through my chest. My legs were encased in heavy casts, numb and distant, as though they belonged to someone else. When I tried to move them, nothing happened. Panic crept in slowly, tightening around my ribs. The last thing I remembered was the rain, endless sheets of water blurring the road ahead. I had been driving too fast, my hands gripping the steering wheel as excitement pulsed through my veins. Just hours earlier, I had signed the documents that would change everything. Victor Ashford, the reclusive client I had quietly assisted for years, had left me his entire estate, $52 million, control of an empire I hadn't even known existed. I had been racing home to tell Vanessa. I imagined her smile, the relief in her eyes, the way she would finally see that my quiet work had always mattered. I never saw the truck until its headlights filled my windshield. A deafening crash, shattering glass, then darkness. Now, lying helpless beneath sterile lights, the weight of reality settled over me like wet concrete. The woman I had risked everything to build a life with had already decided I wasn't worth saving. If you're watching this from somewhere in the world, let me know in the comments where you are. And if you've ever had to rebuild your life from nothing after betrayal, don't forget to like and subscribe. Stories like mine aren't just about revenge, they're about survival. Because in that hospital bed, stripped of dignity and control, I realized something terrifying: the life I knew was gone, and the man I used to be had died on that rain-soaked road. The door to my hospital room opened without a knock. Vanessa walked in, as if she were entering a boardroom, composed, immaculate, untouchable. Not a strand of her dark hair was out of place. Her heels clicked softly against the tile floor, precise and deliberate, each step echoing louder than the machines beside me. She didn't bring flowers. She didn't bring concern. She brought a leather folder. She stopped at the foot of my bed and looked down at me, her expression calm, almost bored. "You're awake," she said flatly. My throat was dry, my voice barely more than a whisper. "Vanessa, what happened?" Her eyes flicked briefly to my legs, encased in heavy casts, then back to my face. There was no sympathy in them, only calculation. "You caused a collision on the interstate," she replied. "The car is totaled. The insurance company is reviewing the claim. But there are complications." Complications? I struggled to sit up, pain tearing through my body. "What do you mean?" She opened the folder and tossed a stack of documents onto my lap. The papers slid across the thin hospital blanket, crisp and impersonal. "Hospital bills, repair estimates, legal notices," she said. "Your medical expenses alone are already exceeding our coverage, and that's before the physical therapy you'll need if you even walk again." Her tone was clinical, detached, as if she were discussing an underperforming asset rather than her husband. I swallowed hard. "I didn't cause the crash. The truck, the police report says otherwise," she cut in sharply. "And the insurance investigator found traces of prescription painkillers in your system." My heart pounded. "That's impossible. I was prescribed medication for my back months ago, but I wasn't taking anything that day." She shrugged, unconcerned. "That's not how it looks. The insurer believes you were impaired. They're denying the claim." The words hit harder than the accident itself. "You lied," I asked, my voice shaking with disbelief. "Vanessa, you told them I was under the influence." "I told them what was necessary," she replied coolly. "Someone has to think realistically about our financial future." I stared at her, the woman I had loved for 7 years, unable to recognize the stranger standing before me. "Where were you?" I asked quietly. "I woke up alone. No one told me you were here." She glanced at her watch, irritation flickering across her face. "I had meetings," Important ones. Life doesn't stop because you made a mistake. A mistake. The word echoed in my mind like a verdict. And the surgery, I asked, dread tightening in my chest. The nurse said you declined it. Vanessa exhaled slowly, as if my question were exhausting her patience. The reconstructive procedure would have cost $40,000 with no guarantee of success. It wasn't a smart investment. Investment, my voice cracked. Vanessa. That surgery could have helped me walk again. She met my gaze without flinching. There was only a 10% chance of full recovery. I refused to gamble our savings on odds that low. Our savings, I repeated, stunned. We could have found another way. I would have paid anything to. There is no way anymore. Adrian, she interrupted, her voice sharp and final. From the folder, she pulled out a single sheet of paper and placed it carefully on the bed beside me. Divorce papers. The room seemed to tilt as I stared at the document. My name was printed in bold black ink at the top, followed by legal language that severed every promise we had ever made. You're divorcing me, I whispered. She folded her arms, her expression devoid of emotion. I'm being practical. You're facing permanent disability, Adrian. That changes everything. A cold silence filled the room. You're my husband, I said, the words barely audible. I thought that meant something. It did. She replied calmly. When you were capable, when you were presentable, when you were an asset. Her gaze hardened, each word delivered with surgical precision. But now you're a liability. The statement landed like a blade. I can't bring a crippled man into investor meetings, she continued. I can't build my future around someone who can't even stand on his own. My career depends on perception, image, strength. I felt something inside me fracture, not loudly, but completely. You're abandoning me, I said quietly. I'm freeing myself, she corrected, and you should be grateful I'm handling this efficiently. She turned toward the door, pausing only long enough to deliver the final blow. Oh, and one more thing, she added, her voice almost casual. I've transferred our joint savings $200,000 into a separate account. Given your condition, I assumed it was best I manage the finances moving forward. My pulse roared in my ears. You took everything. She looked back at me, her expression cold and immaculate. I took what I earned, she said. Sign the papers, Adrian. It will make things easier for both of us. The door closed behind her with a soft click. I lay there in silence, staring at the divorce documents resting on my chest. The pain in my legs was nothing compared to the emptiness spreading through my body. In a single visit, Vanessa hadn't just broken my heart. She had erased my life. And she still had no idea that just hours before the accident, I had become more powerful than she could ever imagine. The door swung open again less than an hour after Vanessa left. This time, she wasn't alone. Vanessa entered with effortless confidence, her hand resting lightly on the arm of a man I had never seen before. He was younger than me, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, his smile sharp and rehearsed, the kind of smile built for cameras and expensive parties. This is Landon, Vanessa said casually, as if introducing a colleague at a networking event. My partner. The word echoed in my mind like an insult carved in stone. Landon stepped forward, his eyes scanning my broken body with open curiosity. Then he pulled out his phone and began recording. Oh my God, he said softly, angling the camera toward me. This is heartbreaking, Vanessa. You didn't tell me he looked this bad. Landon, Vanessa said, though there was no real disapproval in her voice. What I'm documenting reality, he replied smoothly. People need to see the truth. This is what happens when life takes a turn. He crouched slightly, lowering the camera to capture my cast-covered legs. Stay strong, man, he said, his tone dripping with false sympathy. Recovery journeys make incredible content. Humiliation burned hotter than the pain in my body. I tried to move, but the effort only sent a wave of agony through my spine. Vanessa crossed her arms, watching with detached amusement. Landon is building a lifestyle platform, she explained. Inspiration, resilience, luxury stories like yours resonate with audiences. My story, I rasped. This isn't content. This is my life. Landon chuckled lightly. Relax. Think of it as exposure. He straightened, slipping an arm around Vanessa's waist. She didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned into him, her expression softening in a way it never had for me in years. We're moving into the penthouse next week, she added calmly. The one we purchased after selling the house. You won't need to worry about it anymore. The words struck like a second impact. You sold our home, I said, my voice hollow. Vanessa tilted her head slightly. It was the logical decision. Maintaining that property would have been impractical. Given your circumstances, Landon smirked, glancing at the camera before lowering his voice. No offense, Adrian, but Vanessa deserves someone who can keep up with her life. Someone strong. Someone presentable. I stared at them, at the ease with which they stood together, at the effortless cruelty in their expressions. Then, As Landon leaned closer, studying my face with sudden intensity, his smirk faltered. His eyes widened. The color drained from his face. And then, without warning, he let out a sharp, involuntary scream. Vanessa turned toward him, startled. "Landon, what is it?" He staggered back a step. His gaze locked on me as if he were staring at a ghost. "You," he whispered, his voice trembling. "That's impossible." For the first time since the accident, I felt something shift inside me. They still thought I was powerless. They still believed I was broken, but they had just realized something they weren't supposed to know. And their fear was only the beginning. The next morning, the machines around my bed were quieter. Too quiet. A nurse I had never seen before entered the room with a clipboard, her expression distant and professional. She avoided eye contact as she adjusted the IV line beside me. "Mr. Mercer," she said. Her voice rehearsed. "We've received notification from your insurance provider. Your coverage has been officially terminated." The words settled over me slowly, like cold rain seeping into bone. "Terminated?" I asked hoarsely. "That can't be right. My wife, Mrs. Mercer, submitted documentation supporting the insurer's decision," she interrupted gently. "Without active coverage, the hospital can no longer continue non-emergency care." I stared at her, the reality pressing down on my chest. "You're discharging me? Like this?" She hesitated, then nodded. "I'm sorry." By noon, 2 orderlies arrived with a wheelchair. My belongings, what little remained, were packed into a thin plastic bag, a change of clothes, my wallet, and the phone that Vanessa had already disconnected from our shared account. The fluorescent lights blurred overhead as they wheeled me through the sterile corridors. No one spoke. No one looked at me for long. To them, I was no longer a patient, just a liability. Outside, rain poured relentlessly from a gray sky. The orderlies stopped at the edge of the hospital entrance. One of them cleared his throat. "This is as far as we can take you, sir." Before I could respond, they helped me onto a cold metal bench and placed my bag beside me. The rain soaked through my thin hospital clothes within seconds, seeping into the casts around my legs, turning them heavy and suffocating. Then they left. I sat there alone, drenched, shivering, and exposed to the indifferent world rushing past me. Cars splashed through puddles. Strangers hurried by without a second glance. The city moved forward, as if I had already ceased to exist. Minutes later, a familiar black SUV rolled slowly past the curb. Vanessa's car. Through the rain-streaked window, I saw her sitting in the passenger seat, Landon behind the wheel. Their laughter was visible even through the glass. For a brief moment, our eyes met. Recognition flickered across her face. Then Landon accelerated. The SUV veered deliberately toward a deep puddle, its tires slicing through the water. A violent wave of mud and oil splashed over me, drenching my body, staining my clothes, coating my face with filth. They didn't stop. The taillights disappeared into the storm, leaving only the sound of rain and the taste of bitterness in my mouth. In that moment, sitting alone on the sidewalk, soaked and humiliated, I understood with terrifying clarity I was no longer a husband, no longer a patient, no longer a man with a home or a future. I had nothing left, no shelter, no dignity, no one to protect me. Nothing but my will to survive and the cold, unshakable hatred burning quietly inside my chest. Rainwater dripped from my hair onto the pavement as I sat alone outside the hospital, my cast soaked, my body trembling from cold and exhaustion. Every breath felt heavier than the last. For a moment, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of what had happened. Then, I remembered. With shaking hands, I reached into my pocket and pulled out my wallet. Inside, folded carefully between worn receipts, was a small business card, plain, understated, yet impossibly powerful. Blackwood and Pierce, attorneys at law, Mr. Jonathan Blackwood. It had belonged to Victor Ashford. Using the last coins I had, I dragged myself toward a nearby payphone, each movement sending waves of pain through my body. My fingers trembled as I dialed the number printed on the card. The line rang once. "Blackwood and Pierce." A calm voice answered. "This is Adrian Mercer," I said, my voice raw. "I'm calling regarding Victor Ashford's estate." There was a brief pause. Then the tone on the other end shifted, instantly sharper, more alert. "Mr. Mercer," the voice replied. "We've been expecting your call. Please remain where you are. Transportation is already on its way." Within 20 minutes, a sleek black limousine pulled up beside the curb. The driver stepped out immediately, shielding me from the rain with an umbrella, as if I were someone of immense importance. For the first time since the accident, someone treated me with dignity. I was driven across the city to a towering glass building that bore no name, only power. Inside, I was escorted into a private office lined with dark wood and quiet authority. A distinguished man in an impeccably tailored suit rose from behind his desk. "Mr. Mercer," he said, extending his hand. Jonathan Blackwood. Victor Ashford spoke of you often. I struggled to stand, but he gently gestured for me to remain seated. Mr. Ashford passed away 3 days ago, Blackwood continued solemnly. In his final will and testament, he named you as his sole heir. The words hung in the air. Surreal and impossible. He wasn't merely a reclusive collector, Blackwood went on. Victor Ashford was the founder and silent owner of Ashford Holdings, a global luxury conglomerate operating under dozens of high-end brands. My pulse quickened as he placed a leather portfolio before me and opened it. Mr. Ashford has left you $52 million in liquid assets, he said calmly, along with controlling interest in the Ashford Group. The world seemed to shift beneath me. $52 million, an empire, a future reborn from ashes. As I absorbed the magnitude of what I had just inherited, Blackwood's expression grew more serious. There is one stipulation, he added. Mr. Ashford requested that you disappear from public life for 6 months. During this time, you will undergo medical rehabilitation and executive training to prepare you for your new role. No one must know of your survival or your inheritance. Silence filled the room as I stared down at the documents, the weight of destiny resting in my hands. Images flashed through my mind: Vanessa's cold eyes, Landon's mocking smile, the rain-soaked pavement, the humiliation. I lifted the pen slowly. I accept, I said, my voice steady for the first time since the accident. The moment the ink touched the paper, everything changed. The broken man left behind on that sidewalk no longer existed. In his place stood the future owner of an empire, and the beginning of their downfall. For 6 months, Adrian Mercer disappeared from the world. No social media activity, no financial records, no sightings. To Vanessa and Landon, I was nothing more than a broken man discarded on a rain-soaked sidewalk, an inconvenience already forgotten. But, behind closed doors, I was being rebuilt. The rehabilitation facility overlooked a quiet stretch of coastline, its glass walls reflecting the endless horizon. The best surgeons and therapists money could secure worked tirelessly to restore what had been taken from me. The crude casts that once imprisoned my legs were replaced by advanced surgical reconstruction and precision therapy. Pain became my constant companion. Every step felt like walking through fire, every movement a battle against my own body. There were days I collapsed onto the therapy mat, breathless and shaking, wondering if I would ever walk freely again. But each time doubt crept in. I remembered the rain, the humiliation, and the cold indifference in Vanessa's eyes. Step by step, I forced myself forward. By the 4th month, I no longer needed a cane. By the 6th, I walked with steady confidence, leaner, stronger, and harder than the man who had once begged for dignity on a hospital bench. Recovery was only the beginning. Each day, physical therapy was followed by hours of executive training arranged by Blackwood. I studied corporate law, financial strategy, international markets, and high-level negotiation. Advisors from Ashford Holdings treated me not as a patient or a student, but as the future chairman of an empire. I learned how wealth moved across borders, how corporations waged silent wars, and how power could be exercised without ever raising one's voice. The quiet conservator who once restored fragile manuscripts was evolving into a man who could command boardrooms and shape destinies. I practiced speaking in mirrored rooms, refining my tone until authority came naturally. Tailored suits replaced hospital gowns, and a steel watch rested against my wrist, a symbol of time reclaimed. I wasn't just recovering. I was becoming someone new. In the 5th month, the pass found me. Megan, my younger sister, arrived unannounced at the private estate where I was staying. She stood in the doorway with wide eyes and a trembling smile, pretending concern she had never shown before. She said she had been worried, that she hadn't known whether I was alive. I studied her quietly, already sensing the calculation beneath her words. When I asked what she wanted, the facade shattered. She demanded $5,000, insisting it was nothing for someone like me. When I refused, her voice turned sharp with bitterness. She threatened to tell Vanessa where I was hiding, mocking me for running from my own life. I didn't raise my voice. I simply placed a small recording device on the table between us and informed her that she had just admitted to extortion. Security escorted her out as she shouted curses down the hallway. That was the last time I ever saw her. 6 months after the world had buried me, I stood alone on a private balcony overlooking the city skyline. The wind carried the faint scent of rain, a reminder of the night everything had been taken from me. But I was no longer the man they had abandoned. I had healed, I had risen, I had severed every weakness from my life, and now I was ready to return. When I returned to the city, I did not come back as Adrian Mercer, the broken man Vanessa had abandoned. I returned as a shadow unseen, unheard, and infinitely more dangerous. Ashford Holdings operated quietly, and so did I. Through a network of private investigators, financial analysts, and legal advisors, I began observing the lives Vanessa and Landon had built upon the ruins of mine. Every transaction, every public appearance, every whispered rumor was documented and archived with surgical precision. Revenge, I had learned, was not about anger. It was about patience. Vanessa and Landon were living extravagantly. Just as I expected, they occupied a penthouse overlooking the skyline, attended exclusive galas, and flaunted their wealth across social media. To the outside world, they appeared untouchable, successful, glamorous, powerful, but beneath the surface, their empire was hollow. Their luxury lifestyle was financed almost entirely through debt. Every designer handbag, every imported bottle of champagne, every luxury car in their garage was funded by loans, lines of credit, and unpaid obligations. They weren't wealthy, they were leveraged through a shell corporation quietly established by Ashford Holdings. I began acquiring their debts one by one: the mortgage on the penthouse, the lease agreements for their vehicles, the credit lines financing Landon's failing business ventures. Each purchase was executed with meticulous discretion, ensuring my name remained invisible. Within weeks, I became their creditor, their landlord, their banker. They had no idea the man they had discarded now controlled every financial thread holding their lives together. But financial control was only the first step. The second phase required precision. Landon's ambitions revolved around luxury branding. He craved recognition, status, and association with elite institutions. Through Ashford Holdings, I authorized a strategic offer, an exclusive brand partnership with one of our most prestigious subsidiaries. The proposal promised him global exposure, prestige, and an opportunity to cement his position as a luxury influencer. It also contained a morality clause buried within pages of legal language, stipulating a $10 million penalty for any conduct deemed unethical, defamatory, or damaging to the brand's reputation. Landon signed without hesitation. He never read the fine print. The trap was set. Meanwhile, Vanessa continued expanding her high-end real estate portfolio, unaware that every major financial decision she made now required approval from entities secretly under my control. Through carefully orchestrated delays and subtle financial pressure, I tightened the invisible net around her operations. Credit approvals slowed. Investment partners withdrew. Opportunities slipped just beyond her grasp, leaving her increasingly desperate to maintain the illusion of success. The first fracture appeared at an upscale boutique on Fifth Avenue. One afternoon, Vanessa and Landon entered the store expecting their usual treatment: champagne, private viewing rooms, and personalized service. But when Landon attempted to finalize a purchase, his premium credit card was declined. Once, twice, 3 times. The silence that followed was deafening. Vanessa's smile froze, her composure cracking under the scrutiny of attentive sales associates and curious onlookers. Landon forced a laugh, muttering about banking errors and technical glitches. But the humiliation was unmistakable. For the first time, they experienced a glimpse of the instability beneath their carefully constructed image. It was only the beginning. The final piece of the strategy required direct confrontation. One evening, Landon called me. His voice was sharp, aggressive, and laced with desperation. He demanded to know why I had resurfaced, accusing me of hiding assets and threatening legal consequences. He claimed Vanessa had been advised that my accident involved financial misconduct and implied that authorities could reopen the investigation. I let him speak, allowing his arrogance to fill the silence. Then, in a calm and measured tone, I agreed to meet him at a quiet diner on the outskirts of the city. He arrived early, impatient and visibly agitated. When I entered, he barely concealed his shock at my transformation, standing tall, composed, no trace of the broken man he remembered, but arrogance quickly replaced his surprise. "You should have stayed gone," he sneered, leaning across the table. "Vanessa's moved on. You're nothing but a liability now." I remained silent, letting him talk. The more he spoke, the more reckless he became. He boasted about manipulating insurance investigators, forging signatures to access joint funds, and fabricating evidence to protect Vanessa's reputation. His words spilled freely, fueled by arrogance and the belief that I was powerless. "You really think anyone would believe you over us?" he said with a smirk. "You were doped up, broken, and conveniently absent. We controlled the narrative." I leaned back slightly, my expression calm. "You forged my signature," I said quietly. "You committed tax fraud. And you accessed accounts under my name." His smile faltered. "Be careful what you accuse me of," he replied sharply. I reached into my pocket and placed a small recording device on the table between us. The color drained from his face as realization dawned. Every word he had spoken, every confession had been captured. I stood slowly, adjusting the cuff of my suit. "This conversation is over," I said evenly. "But your consequences are just beginning." Without another glance, I left the diner, the cool night air carrying away the last remnants of my former life. By the time I stepped into the waiting car, The final pieces of the strategy had fallen into place. Vanessa and Landon were trapped financially, legally, and socially without even realizing it. They still believed they were winning. They still believed I was powerless. And soon, they would walk willingly into the stage I had prepared for them, certain they were about to ascend. Never suspecting they were being led to their own public execution. The invitations were delivered on heavy ivory cardstock, embossed with gold lettering and sealed with the insignia of Ashford Holdings. Exclusive, prestigious, impossible to ignore. Vanessa received hers first. I imagined the moment clearly, the subtle widening of her eyes, the quickening of her breath as she read the words, Annual Ashford Global Gala, invitation only. It was the kind of event she had spent years trying to access, the kind of room where fortunes were shaped and reputations were forged. For Vanessa, this was more than an invitation. It was validation. Landon's reaction was even more predictable. Within minutes, his social media hinted at exciting developments and major announcements on the horizon. He believed this invitation was his breakthrough, the opportunity to secure global recognition as the face of a luxury brand. The contract he had signed months earlier still lingered in his mind like a promise of destiny. They thought they were ascending. They had no idea they were being summoned. In the weeks leading up to the gala, desperation drove them to excess. Vanessa liquidated her remaining assets to commission a custom couture gown valued at $50,000, a statement piece designed to command attention in a room filled with elites. Landon sold his Rolex to finance a bespoke tuxedo and secure additional luxury accessories, determined to project an image of unshakable success. Every decision they made pulled them deeper into the illusion. I watched it all unfold from a distance, reviewing reports and photographs with quiet satisfaction. Their debts were secured, their reputations fragile, and their confidence dangerously inflated. They believed the gala would mark the beginning of a new era in their lives. They were right. On the night of the event, the city skyline glittered beneath a velvet sky. As limousines lined the entrance of the Ashford Grand Ballroom, the elite arrived in waves: investors, magnates, celebrities, each step reinforcing the exclusivity of the evening. Vanessa and Landon arrived last, stepping out of their car with calculated elegance, convinced they belonged among the powerful. Their smiles were flawless, their posture confident, their ambitions limitless. They didn't see me watching from the shadows above the grand staircase, observing their every movement with calm precision. To them, this was the night they would rise. To me, it was the night everything they had built would collapse. They had walked willingly into the arena, and the execution was about to begin. The Ashford Global Gala unfolded beneath a canopy of crystal chandeliers and muted orchestral music, every detail curated to reflect power, exclusivity, and legacy. The ballroom shimmered with wealth-tailored tuxedos, couture gowns, and quiet conversations between people who shaped industries with a handshake. It was a room designed to celebrate dominance. Vanessa and Landon entered believing they belonged. They stepped onto the marble floor with effortless confidence, their expressions polished, their posture flawless. Vanessa's couture gown shimmered beneath the chandeliers, its dramatic silhouette crafted to command attention. Landon walked beside her with calculated ease, his tailored tuxedo and rehearsed smile radiating ambition. To an untrained eye, they appeared indistinguishable from the elite surrounding them, but the illusion fractured almost immediately. An usher approached, his expression polite but distant. "This way, please," he said, guiding them not toward the center of the ballroom, but to a table discreetly positioned near the service entrance, close enough to hear the clatter of catering trays and the murmur of staff coordinating logistics. Vanessa hesitated. "There must be a mistake," she said softly, her voice edged with tension. "We were invited as special guests." The usher's smile remained professional. "Your table has been arranged according to the host's instructions, ma'am." The words landed with quiet finality. Around them, the elite took their seats in positions of prestige, front row proximity to the stage, perfect visibility, the unspoken hierarchy of influence made visible in crystal and gold. Vanessa's smile stiffened, her composure strained but intact. Landon leaned closer, whispering reassurances about exclusivity and discretion, convincing himself as much as her. They didn't yet realize they had already been placed exactly where I wanted them. Moments later, another familiar face appeared in the ballroom: Megan, dressed in a server's uniform. She moved carefully between tables, balancing a tray of champagne flutes. The arrogance that once defined her had been replaced by forced humility, her eyes scanning the room for opportunity. When she spotted Vanessa and Landon, recognition sparked instantly. "Megan," Vanessa whispered sharply. "What are you doing here?" "I work here now," Megan replied, her voice trembling with desperation. "I just needed something stable. I thought maybe you could help me, please." Landon's expression hardened instantly. "We don't know you," he said coldly, turning away. Megan's face crumpled. "You promised security. Landon snapped quietly, signaling toward a nearby guard. She's harassing guests, as Megan was escorted away. Her tray tilted, sending champagne spilling across the polished marble floor. Gasps rippled through the nearby tables as she was dismissed like an inconvenience, discarded by the very people she had once hoped to impress. The orchestra fell silent, a soft chime echoed through the ballroom as the lights dimmed, drawing every gaze toward the massive LED screen suspended above the stage. Vanessa straightened in her seat, anticipation flickering in her eyes. Landon adjusted his cufflinks, his smile returning, convinced that this was the moment their ascent would begin. The screen flickered to life. At first, it displayed serene images of luxury Ashford Holdings properties, global ventures, philanthropic foundations. Applause rippled politely through the room. Then the visuals shifted. The footage that followed was unmistakable. A hospital room, harsh fluorescent lighting, a broken man lying motionless in a bed. Me. The video showed Vanessa standing beside Landon, her expression cold and detached as he filmed my injuries. Laughter echoed faintly from the speakers. His voice smooth, mocking filled the ballroom. Recovery journeys make incredible content. The room fell silent. The footage continued, Vanessa refusing the surgery, Landon filming, their careless cruelty exposed in unforgiving clarity. The moment they kissed beside my hospital bed played in brutal slow motion, their betrayal magnified for all to see. A ripple of shock moved through the audience. Conversations ceased. Glasses paused midair, every eye turned toward their table. Vanessa's face drained of color. "This is a mistake," she whispered urgently. "It's fabricated. A deep fake." Landon rose abruptly from his chair. "Turn it off," he shouted, his voice cracking. "This is defamation." But the video did not stop. The final scene showed them driving away from the hospital, splashing muddy water over a broken man abandoned on the sidewalk. Gasps filled the ballroom. Panic overtook them. Landon attempted to move toward the exit, but two security guards stepped forward, blocking his path. Vanessa's composure shattered completely, as whispers spread like wildfire through the elite crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," a calm voice echoed through the room. I stepped into the light. The murmurs intensified as I descended the grand staircase. Each step deliberate, controlled, unhurried. The man they had discarded, the man they believed broken and erased, now stood before them transformed. I wore a perfectly tailored black suit, its lines sharp and understated. My posture was steady, my gait confident, every movement reflecting authority. The room fell silent as I reached the center of the stage. "My name is Adrian Mercer," I said evenly, "though many of you now know me as Adrian Ashford, the newly appointed chairman of Ashford Holdings." Shock rippled through the audience like a physical force. Vanessa stared at me, her eyes wide with disbelief. Landon's expression shifted from anger to terror as realization dawned. "I stand before you not merely as the host of this evening," I continued calmly, "but as the sole heir to Victor Ashford's legacy." The screen behind me illuminated once more, displaying legal documents confirming my inheritance and executive authority. "I would also like to address a matter concerning one of our recently contracted ambassadors," I added, turning my gaze toward Landon. He froze. "The gentleman seated there," I said, my voice precise and unyielding, "entered into a contractual agreement with Ashford Holdings. A contract that includes a strict morality clause." I lifted a document from the podium. "By exploiting the suffering of another for personal gain, falsifying public narratives, and engaging in conduct detrimental to the reputation of our brand, Mr. Landon Price has violated this agreement." A pause followed long enough for the weight of the moment to settle. "As stipulated," I concluded, "Ashford Holdings hereby terminates the partnership and demands immediate payment of the $10 million penalty." Landon's composure shattered completely. "You can't do this," he shouted, his voice echoing across the silent ballroom. "You're destroying my career." I turned to Vanessa, my expression calm, almost indifferent. "As for Miss Vanessa Mercer," I continued, "her financial obligations have also been reviewed." A second set of documents appeared on the screen. Mortgage agreements, credit lines, asset transfers. "Through legally acquired holdings," I said steadily, "Ashford Holdings now controls the mortgage on your penthouse, the leases on your vehicles, and the outstanding debts tied to your financial portfolio." Vanessa's breath caught audibly. "No, that's not possible." "It is," I replied, "effective immediately. All assets under your name are subject to foreclosure proceedings." Her legs seemed to weaken beneath her, her confidence collapsing under the weight of undeniable truth. Before either of them could respond, the ballroom doors opened once more. Two agents stepped inside, their presence commanding immediate attention. "Mr. Landon Price," one of them announced, displaying a badge, "you are under arrest for tax evasion, wire fraud, and aggravated identity theft." Gasps rippled through the audience as Landon staggered backward, his face pale with shock. "This is insane," he shouted, turning toward Vanessa. "Do something." But Vanessa said nothing. Her world was collapsing around her, and there was no escape. As the agents placed Landon in handcuffs, cameras flashed from every direction. The media, strategically positioned throughout the ballroom, captured every second of their downfall. Vanessa's composure finally shattered. "You planned this," she whispered, her voice trembling with disbelief. "You planned everything." I met her gaze steadily. "No," I replied calmly. "You did. You chose betrayal. You chose cruelty. I simply ensured you faced the consequences." Silence enveloped the ballroom. As the agents escorted Landon away, his protests fading into the distance, Vanessa remained frozen in place, stripped of power, status, and illusion. I turned back to the audience, my expression composed. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice steady and unshaken, "thank you for your presence this evening. Let this serve as a reminder that integrity is the foundation of true success, and that actions, no matter how carefully hidden, always find their way into the light." Applause began slowly, then grew into a thunderous ovation that filled the ballroom with undeniable finality. Vanessa stood alone, surrounded by whispers and judgment, her empire reduced to ashes. As I stepped away from the stage, I felt no anger, only clarity. They had believed they were ascending. Instead, they had walked willingly into their own public execution, and justice, at last, had been served. Justice does not end with applause. In the weeks following the gala, the consequences unfolded with quiet precision, each one sealing the fate of those who had tried to erase me. Landon Price was convicted on multiple federal charges, including tax evasion, wire fraud, and aggravated identity theft. His carefully crafted image collapsed overnight. The luxury brands that once courted him severed all ties, and his social media empire vanished as platforms suspended his accounts. In prison, stripped of influence and protection, he became just another inmate. No cameras, no audience, no applause. Eventually, he was placed in protective custody, not out of respect, but necessity. The world had forgotten him, and, for the first time, he had no narrative to control. Vanessa's fall was slower, but far more devastating. With her assets foreclosed and her reputation shattered, she disappeared from the circles she once dominated. Former colleagues refused her calls. Investors withdrew their support. And the industry that had once admired her ambition now treated her name as a cautionary tale. Forced to sell what little remained of her possessions, she took a low-level administrative job in a small real estate office far from the city's elite districts. The woman who once measured her worth by influence and status now lived in quiet obscurity, her reflection a constant reminder of the life she had destroyed with her own hands. Months later, I received a letter from Megan. The envelope was worn, the handwriting hesitant. She apologized for her betrayal, pleading for forgiveness and another chance to rebuild our relationship. She wrote about hardship, regret, and the lessons she claimed to have learned. I read every word in silence. Then, I folded the letter and placed it aside. I did not respond. Instead, I arranged for a private educational trust to cover my niece's tuition, ensuring her future would not be defined by her mother's mistakes. The funds were transferred directly to the institution, anonymous and irrevocable. Megan would receive no acknowledgement, only the quiet understanding that some bonds, once broken, can never be restored. As the seasons changed, life moved forward with calm certainty. I had reclaimed more than wealth or power. I had reclaimed control over my destiny. The pain that once defined me had transformed into clarity, and the anger that once burned within me had long since faded. Their downfall was never my true victory. My victory was becoming the man they believed I could never be, and in the silence that followed, I finally understood the difference between revenge and freedom. The cemetery was silent except for the whisper of wind through the trees. I stood before Victor Ashford's grave, a bouquet of white lilies resting in my hands. The marble headstone gleamed beneath the soft afternoon light, simple yet dignified, much like the man who had seen value in me when the world had not. "I hope I honored your legacy," I said quietly, placing the flowers at the base of the stone. "You gave me more than an inheritance. You gave me a second life." For a moment, I remained there, letting the silence settle over me. The weight I had carried for so long no longer pressed against my chest. Revenge had not consumed me. It had freed me, not because I had destroyed those who betrayed me, but because I had reclaimed the man they tried to erase. As I walked back to my car, I paused at the bridge overlooking the river. The current flowed steadily beneath me, endless and unstoppable. From my pocket, I removed the wedding ring Vanessa had once placed on my finger. It caught the fading sunlight, a symbol of promises broken and illusions lost. Without hesitation, I let it fall. The ring disappeared beneath the surface, swallowed by the moving water. And with it, the final remnants of a life that no longer belonged to me. I took a slow breath and stepped back, a quiet certainty settling within me. Anywhere I want, I murmured to the empty horizon. The world is mine now, and true power does not shout, it waits, it observes. And when the time is right, it acts with precision. Those who mistake silence for weakness often learn their lesson too late. In the end, value is not defined by what others see but by what you know you are worth. Thank you for being part of this journey. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Disclaimer. This story is created by the Fish Tells Stories team for entertainment purposes only. Please do not attempt to replicate any actions depicted in this narrative.